Welcome back to Real and Raw episode 2. And today we're joined by Jarra Davis, who's a social media influencer and an AFL content creator. Jarra, thank you very much for joining us today here on Real and Raw.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No worries. So let's get to the start. So just give us a quick rundown of what made you fall in love with footy.
Yeah, well, footy's, I think the thing that made me fall in love with it, well, one, I was forced to play it from a young age with the old man. He's a bit of a footy nuff, but that was sort of our love language together. That was the way that we spent time together, was watching footy, mostly analysing footy. So when we would go to the footy, we'd sit in sort of the bleachers up at level 4 of the MCG, and instead of watching where the play was, we would highlight specific players. So back in the day, that was like an Alan Didak or an Alan Tuvey a lot of the time, because I was playing in the back line. And that was sort of the way that we sort of spent our time together. It was the only thing that we sort of got along with. So that was probably why I fell in love with footy, just because I wanted to just, hang out with the old man as much as possible.
Perfect. And with the studying, obviously on the side, so when you grew up playing footy and then obviously with school, were you ever like school only, not really footy, or always footy the whole way through?
Always footy. Didn't really have any plans to work in footy or sports at all. Mostly just because, you look at the sort of footy media sort of landscape at the moment, and it's all, there's sort of two subsections. There's the journalists, your Mitch Clearys, your Tom Morrises, your Damien Barretts and things like that. And then there's the ex-footy players. And you see obviously all like the legends of the game, but even, like the Ruby Schleissers coming up, the Kate McCarthys. And if you're not either one of like those, if you're not a hardcore journalist or an ex-player, it's really hard to sort of break into that footy media. So growing up, there was no real person to follow and sort of idolise in that sense, because I was never good enough to get to the highest level, and I never wanted to be a journalist. So it was hard to see where maybe I would fit in sports media as a whole. So I sort of just went down the school route, studied law, and thought that was going to be it for me.
So how many years have you studied for the law? Is it a double degree with politics, was it?
Yeah, so double degree politics and economics. Started in 21, so I'm what 5 years through it. 4 years maybe this is my 5th year.
Yeah.
Should be my last year. Well, it was supposed to be my last year, but we extended it a little bit given the new gig and things like that. I do really enjoy it. I love the research side of it. I love knuckling down into a subject, so law really sort of suits that.
Cool. And touching on footy still, so we know your love for the game, and you and the rest of the Marmalade boys and a few other content creators, you've started your Div 12 Resis, and you've joined a team together. So talk to us a bit about that, how it's going, and what the thought process behind starting it was.
Yeah, well, it's not going very well. We didn't make finals last year. We got smacked a couple times. The boys lost on the weekend, so we're not going that well, but hopefully we can get a couple wins on the board in the next few weeks. But we were all sort of playing separately. So while Caden sort of being the ringleader, he sort of had retired from footy for a few years. Will Taylor was out in Geelong playing for the Geelong West Giants. I was playing for Monash Uni, and then obviously Checkers and Trey and stuff were over at Adelaide playing at Lockleys. But we were all sort of making our own footy content, just sort of separately. So I was making sort of these like Resi game day vlogs, and then Willie T started doing a pretty similar thing. And then we obviously saw the Div 12 Resi stuff in Adelaide that started to pop off with Checkers and Shrey. So when they moved to Melbourne, we all sort of thought it would be a really good idea if we sort of all joined forces together, played in the same team, not only for the fun aspect of it, but we thought we could bring a pretty good message to a lot of younger kids that, Caden quit the game because, it was no longer fun to play footy. So we wanted to say that, you can have fun just playing footy, just playing local, pretty low level, rocking up on a Saturday morning, 9 a.m. in the cold and still sort of enjoy footy without maybe, having the pressure of being the best or the most skilled, and I hope that we sort of, put that through in making fun of ourselves a little bit.
You absolutely do. It's unreal. But talk about the night games. So did you play in the first one at Lockleys?
Yeah. So Checkers had this what we thought at the time was a really dumb idea because it was only about 3 or 4 weeks out from the night. He goes, I want to play a night game in Adelaide. We'll fly you boys across. You know, we'll make it this big spectacle. We'll raise a bunch of money for charity. We'll sell lots of chocolate milks and stuff. And I was like, mate, we're 3 weeks away from this. Like, what are you on about? Like, this is the most stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. And then I swear Checkers, the man just never sleeps. He's just constantly working. So within the 3 weeks, he sort of put together this massive event with some help of some other of the players who ended up playing for us. We got some sponsors on board, and then we obviously just created this, you know, one night only event in Adelaide that went really well. We had, you know, I think it was like 30,000 people on stream watching, and then, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 people that rocked up in person. And then we sort of saw maybe what the potential was for it. You know, we raised a shit ton of money for, you know, the junior footy club at Lockleys. You know, allowed them to obviously invest in you know, new equipment and teams and things like that. So, yeah, we sort of thought maybe we could sort of recreate it each and every year.
And then obviously it grew into bigger and better things with the next version of the night game, which was Daisy Thomas appearing.
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
Yeah, so that was also a nightmare. Seems like everything we do is a nightmare logistically because in the VAFA you can't get paid to play as an amateur footballer. So none of the players in the VAFA get paid legally. You know, there's rumours that a few of the top teams maybe paying people under the table and things like that.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. But so just getting Daisy across the line, he said yes pretty last minute. And then obviously we have to put in transfers and player permits and things like that. And then the league just didn't believe that he wasn't playing for a fat lot of cash. So we're signing documents and statutory, you know, declarations and things like that. And then all a complete nightmare to get up to the game. And then we play the game and Daisy does his thing and he's probably the perfect person for it. You know, yeah, riles up the crowd and really just engaged in sort of the culture that we were trying to create of a night game. And we've got a few plans this year that hopefully we can bring sort of that spectacle back again to local footy, because that's what we want to do. You know, we want to celebrate local footy. A lot of the people that we play with, a lot of the people that we play against will never play in front of more than, like, you know, 50 people that rock up at Saturday on a 9 a.m. But, you know, a lot of the people that play in our team now, or, you know, the teams that we verse, so Oakley for Daisy's game, you know, like, people rocking up and there's thousands of people there and there's, you know, hundreds of cameras and there's hundreds of kids screaming and heckling you and you sort of get this massive big game experience that, you know, like it really is a once in a lifetime thing that, you know, a lot of these like local footy players never get to experience, and we sort of want to bring that to as many different people and places as we can.
Wow. So we did realise the nightmare that it was to actually get these guys in, like all the document. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's
it should just be like a charity thing almost. Like, oh, let these guys do it. It's good for the game. But
yeah. The leagues are tough. If you should try and get Checkers on and just get him to explain the sort of
the shithousery.
The issues he has with the leagues, and you know, because it's tough for them to understand what we're doing. And they see, you know, like AFL superstar media personality coming to play the lowest level of the VAFA, you know, in their mind they're going, geez, he must be getting paid a shit ton of money to do it. And obviously, you know, we don't pay anyone to play for us.
Absolutely. You can't really blame them though.
Yeah, exactly. So just what I can understand where they're coming from. But yeah, Checkers does deal with a lot behind the scenes.
He's the mastermind. So, were there any other players you were looking out for trying to get involved, or was it just Daisy the whole time?
Oh, there's plenty of players that we want to get involved. It is hard sort of convincing them. But now that Daisy's done it, and, you know, every time we have one of these events, every time we go over to Adelaide, play one of the biggest games with 12 Rezzies, or after the Daisy game, suddenly all of our DMs just get flooded with, you know, former footy players or media personalities that want to play in the game because they see sort of the spectacle of it, which is really cool. But also, there's so much organisation, there's so much planning behind the scenes, and it's one thing saying you want to play, and then there's another thing actually rocking up, strapping on the boots, getting out there. Because, like, there's a lot of pressure for a player like Daisy to come into into that sort of game. And if you don't perform well or you don't
You'll get heckled,
deliver a
yeah.
spectacle, it can be a pretty grim night out.
He was pretty good though.
Yeah,
Like, real good.
absolutely.
He had like the pepperty steps, still like the gusto, the speed, the bounce,
Oh,
everything. You don't, because obviously he's not in his best form, best shape. But geez, like you could just tell how above and beyond the AFL players were compared to.
yeah. I don't think people understand how good these players are. And that probably is the one thing about Daisy that sort of blew my mind a little bit. Like he's obviously put on a little bit of weight, as you would going from
anyone would.
an elite athlete to
Especially loving a beer.
in the media. But that first 3 steps, like he's still
It's
got
the
it.
difference, absolutely.
You know, and he's still jumping on people's shoulders, and you're like, well, this bloke, like, and then you start to think, geez, these players are just so far ahead of us.
Levels above.
And he was doing this while he was jumping the fence, drinking beers with all the fans, like.
That's
he
the
was-
spectacle. That's what it's all about, I reckon. Like,
Yeah, and that's sort of the vibe that we want to deliver as much as possible. Like we want to keep it as local as possible. It's all good and well to get a really elite player to come down and play for us, but if they don't buy into the culture that we're trying to build, then it doesn't really make much sense. So Dane Swan's doing a really good job at the moment of going to local footy clubs and doing
He'd be
sportsman's
perfect.
nights, and he'd be really good at that.
Yeah.
Mitch Robinson is very similar, so we got him involved in the Div 12 Resis in the first year.
It's like what they do when they send some of the media personalities out, like Matty Lloyd, out to the clubs
Yeah.
to play.
Yeah, and you really need the players to sort of buy in. So, like, you know, a player like Kane Corns or something, you know, health nut, health freak, you know, it would be unreal to get him to play, and probably, you know, if we were picking a dream team for this year's game, he'd probably be top of the list. Adelaide legend, you know, the biggest name in sports media at the moment. But then we do have to wrestle with the fact that we need enough of these players to buy into the culture as well. And he's one that's not going to buy into the culture. He'll be great to bring people down and get people to heckle him and get
He might tag someone.
and get the audience
He might
involved.
tag you.
He might tag Prime Train because I tried to do that last year and he got
Oh.
70 touches. So clearly I did do a good job.
Quickly, on the 100 touches, you reckon that's real?
No, was it April Fool's Day?
Might have been.
I think it might have been an April Fool's joke.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't know if he's played a game yet this year. I played in a round robin tournament with him a few weeks ago, but I don't think he's played a game yet.
Right.
Yeah, I reckon someone might just be pulling everyone's
Pull
leg.
someone's leg, yeah.
Yeah.
We might take you back to the times you're producing. So obviously you're producing with the List Cloggers podcast. So talk to us about the characters, Dylan, Dan, like what they're about.
Just genuinely two of the best blokes for one, but also two of the most unbelievable characters. Extremely talented. Gave me a chance as well, which I try and thank them sort of as much as possible. So, you know, I had zero experience in anything media related outside of, you know, making TikToks by myself. And then, you know, them giving me a chance to come in and be an editor for a little bit, learn that, then jump into being, you know, on the production side with Sammy Bonza, who's a legend as well. But seeing the way that they work is just phenomenal. Like the way that Dan comes into the studio every Monday, and you know, we used to record for 3.5 hours or something. So sitting there for a long time is rough, but you know, the energy he brought, the way he'd buy into sort of every joke and gag.
Set the tone.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, you know, I can understand why he's become, you know, probably bigger than footy at this point.
Absolutely.
Like, is he just
100%.
commits to the bit with everything, and that's just part of his sort of character.
I feel like after every Thursday night game, you look on your Instagram, it's Dan Does Footy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's either a forfeit because Carlton lost or
It's
just some funny.
it's ridiculous. Like, I'm starting to get like messages from my mates going, my girlfriend's never watched a game of footy, and yet she's refreshing
Literally.
Dan's page after a Carlton loss
Mate,
to see what he
so
does.
is mine.
And I'm like,
what are we doing?
this man is transcending football at the moment, and but to be fair, it's clear to see why. Like, he's
It's good for footy as well.
such an incredible character. You know, he's so good at what he does, and sort of seeing the birth of that at List Cloggers. You know, like List Cloggers is, you know, biggest footy podcast. You know,
During that year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
so it was like there was huge potential there, and then he just sort of just skyrocketed that to the next level, going out and doing Dan Does Footy. So, yeah, pretty incredible to see.
And you did a little bit of work with Channel 7. You were producing their Armchair Experts. Talk to us a little bit about that and working with them. And was Cam Luke and Georgie Parker that one?
So not Georgie Parker.
Sorry,
I came
no.
in the year later. Cam
The
Luke's
year
still
after.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar thing to List Cloggers. It was, I came in with pretty much no experience outside of, working on List Cloggers as a producer. And I think I just wanted experience in maybe a bit of a more professional environment, in the sense that mainstream media is very different to the way that independent podcasts work. We have to do a lot more legality things, and there's a lot more hierarchy of bosses and things that you've got to please in ads and sponos and things like that. So I sort of wanted that experience, but such a cool show. Like every Friday night, we watch the footy together, and then we're on after the footy, and you're sort of just chatting footy, and we try to make it as you're sitting on the couch with your mates and watching Cam Luke come in, and then watching Kate McCarthy come in a year later, and just seeing her rise was pretty incredible. Like Cam is just the consummate professional, just so good at what he does, such a really good host. And then Kate came in, just an incredible analyst, and sort of is getting her break at the moment on 7 and with the AFL platform. And then Adam Cooney is just like the ultimate character to be around, and just really fun vibe that sort of group was.
Is there a moment from that kind of time do you think about with your time at Armchair Experts, like a funny moment or anything like that?
I'd say there's too many funny moments, a few stories I probably can't tell.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think just watching the footy with 3 very different characters, like Kate's really there trying to take notes and analyse the game. Cam's there, like, just watching anything but the footy. Like he's got, NBA highlights up on his phone, or he's got, the races on or something. And then Adam's just losing his mind, just yelling at players through the TV and bringing up the time he won a Brownlow and things like that. And it's just like all these 3 competing personalities, going back and forth, and just being in that room was really cool. It was also the first time I'd probably been around like proper professionals in the industry, and you go from like watching these people on TV to sort of being involved in how the TV product gets made. So that was a pretty cool sort of switch as well. It took me a little while to maybe get comfortable with it, but yeah, I look back on that and so that was a really, really good experience to have.
Was it the nerves that kind of made it hard at the start with them, or like did you get starstruck or anything like that?
I'm probably pretty lucky. We were talking as we were walking in. Like
Absolutely.
I don't really get that nervous or starstruck. I don't think I've ever been really starstruck. I've definitely been nervous plenty of times, but I think when you do things you sort of love or some things you're, really passionate about, the nerves sort of go away a little bit. Especially when you realise that, like AFL players, for example, like they're genuinely just like 22, 23-year-old kids as well. Like the hosts and all the people on TV, like they're just like the most normal people ever who are just doing their job. So when you sort of look at it like that, sort of the nerves go away because you sort of take them off that pedestal of being, untouchable.
100% there. We'll move on. So you won the first ever KO call-up that Fox Footy did. So talk to us about that and what made you apply for it and how you felt after winning it.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool competition just in general. I think it's, like I said before, like, there's not a lot of ways that people have made it into like footy media specifically. The Journal or the Ex-Player has been sort of the only sort of blueprint at the moment. So I think this competition sort of opens it up to, so many other different people. Like you sort of look through the applications and there's, local footy commentators who are going crazy. There was, hosts and people with really big personalities coming from different sports or completely different industries. There was like really good, like football analysts who, are in their bedroom making really good analysis videos. And you're like, well, these guys are really smart football-wise, but they'll never get the chance to do it.
Yeah, and that's the issue there because unless if you like have coming from a football background, sort of like got no chance.
Yeah.
It's like it's very hard to break into the scene.
Yeah, it really is. And then I think that's sort of why this competition sort of grew legs a little bit, was the fact that it gave, I guess, like the everyday man, the common man, the chance to join, such a really cool industry, such a really cool job. Yeah, I actually didn't really want to apply. I feel like
Okay.
I'd already built a platform. I was, about to head into my final year of law. I sort of had like a plan that what I was going to do, and then someone gave me a call and said I should. So I did, and then I sort of used my application to shout out some of the other people who I thought maybe deserved a bigger platform. A few of the accounts that I follow that don't have a huge number of followers, but I think produce really good things.
Okay.
So I tried to use that to shout out, and I think maybe Fox liked the way that I did it, or something like that, and now we're here.
Well, it's interesting because being part of a table like Fox, you'd have to collaborate. You'd have to be like on good terms with everyone. So that's probably why were very receptive to that kind of shout out idea.
Yeah, and that's and yeah, as you said, Fox is a very collaborative environment. Like every show's got 4 or 5 people on it. You're constantly bouncing off people left and right. Every time you're on screen or on air or just around the office, you're constantly surrounded by other talent. So you do have to learn all the different personalities and I guess how to navigate being different people with different people in different environments.
Yeah, how would you describe your role at the moment? Like, is
Yeah.
it started from the bottom kind of thing, or have you been like propelled up there a little bit?
No, I'd say I've started from the bottom, which I think is a really good thing. I think, there was an initial idea to sort of just throw me into being, like a mainstay on a show or something like that. And although I think that would have been really cool, I think, you do sort of have to earn your stripes and earn your respect. And I think I wanted to do that sort of in my way. And I'm a social media first person. That's what I've grown up on. That's what I've sort of built my audience and skill set on. So I've sort of taken that lead and sort of taken over their social media a little bit, which I think is really cool. I think we've produced some really cool stuff. And then I'm also just trying to find out where I fit. So really cool way to do that, I thought, was to, shadow a different person every week. I can make a video about it, showcase their personality. And then also I can find out maybe where I fit long term, whether that's, in special comments or, at the desk, or maybe I'm down on the boundary, or, maybe I'm just on the bounce or something like that.
Would you say that you've found a place now that you see yourself fitting? And if so, where do you see yourself fitting with box footy in the future?
I can't say I have just yet. I think I really love the boundary and special comments.
That was with Moons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love the boundary. I really love special comments at the moment. But I've also really loved my time in studio. I think Kath Lachlan does a really good job of sort of moderating conversations. And that's something that I've really that's maybe taken me back a little bit, is not necessarily so footy heavy, but just sort of moderating a conversation and getting the best out of Jack and Kingy every Saturday. So maybe it's there. I'm a few weeks in, but I'm slowly figuring it out, I think.
Can you talk to us about Kingy or about all the analysts on Fox Footy? Talk to me how much work they are doing on the stats.
Kingy is probably the hardest working man in footy that I've seen. So his role on Super Saturday, which is obviously Fox's exclusive footy day, he's on air 12 to 12. They're obviously not on air 12 hours straight. There's obviously the games in between and stuff. But this man, I'll roll in at 10:30 and he's there. Laptop out, prepping notes for what he's going to say pre-game. And then throughout each game, he's on his laptop. He's writing notes. He's watching every game. He's watching every stat. He's a complete football nerd in the best way possible. And he just does that for 12 hours straight. And then the next day he does it again all day Sunday for the Sunday games. So he's ready for Monday morning radio and first crack on a Sunday night. And he's just the ultimate football nerd. And his whole life during football season just revolves around watching, analysing and studying footy and the stats. And it's pretty wild to see.
When you shadowed him that day, was there anything the way he looked at the footy compared to you or the average person that you were like, wow? that's why he's so good?
Yeah, so I've always watched footy with my old man. We used to sort of focus on one player at a time. So I'd follow one player for a quarter and just look at their running patterns, where they're positioning themselves on the ground, things like that. The average footy fan, sorry, the average footy fan probably watches where the ball goes, which is good. Like that's the most entertaining side of it. That's just the most casual way to watch footy. Where the ball goes, who gets the most of the ball. And I thought that analysts probably do what I do, which is watch players in specifically. But he is the exact opposite. He doesn't watch a specific player. He doesn't watch where the ball goes. He only watches what a player does with the ball. He doesn't care how you get it. He doesn't care if you take a contested mark or if you get an uncontested handball. If your disposal leads to damage or score, that is the only thing he cares about, which is why he has such a love for Isaac Rankin, because every time Isaac Rankin touches the ball,
It's gold.
Adelaide seem to score.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing he looks out for. It's basically the main stat that he has on his computer is essentially damage, is how you use the football. So it's pretty strange that he's really focused in on that. But if that's the way he wants to watch it, I think he's doing a pretty good job of it.
Has it changed your view on the games? Obviously working at Fox Footy now, and with the personnel you've got there, has it changed you? How's it changed your view on the game and the way you're looking at it personally?
Yeah, I mean, so I used to essentially go into every game looking for something. And I think that's probably changed. I don't go into any game looking for something to happen, because if you're looking for something to happen,
Close-minded.
yeah. So it's like, it's very simple. It's like, if I said like name everything red in this room, you'd obviously look for everything red.
Yeah.
And then if the question I asked you after that was, what'd you see that was blue? You wouldn't understand. You'd be like, I don't know what. I didn't look for any blue. But maybe the gold is the blue stuff. So I've maybe gone into each game with a more open mind, trying to figure out what's actually leading to why they're winning, instead of going in and maybe having preconceptions about what I think is going to happen. Yeah.
That's unreal. And also, when it comes to the commentary, so you shadowed Matt Hill on, it was just last week.
Yep.
Talk us through the skill he has compared to what you thought a commentator had.
It's fascinating. I've only obviously followed him as a commentator. I've been in the commentary box a few times, so I've seen like Joey Montagna do it. I've seen Anthony Hudson do it, and Matt Hill just has something special about him. I don't know if it's just the voice that gets me going, but the way he speaks about commentary is fascinating. There's a few videos coming out about just the way he looks at the game. And sort of his role in the game. A lot of commentators will say that they're there to describe the game, or describe what's going on, and Matt Hill doesn't really see himself as that. He sees himself as, if a footy fan can watch the game and not even realise there's commentary, he goes, I've done a really good job. He goes, I want people to know that I'm not there, essentially. And it's such a weird thing to think about in your brain, that the person who's calling each play isn't there. But sometimes I do catch myself watching a Matt Hill game and I don't even realise that there's a commentator, because there's no fluff, there's nothing. He's just calling exactly what you're seeing.
100%.
And I think that's pretty fascinating the way he does it.
Definitely. And even listening to like his racing commentary, it's just, there's something about it. It's his voice. It's unique, and it's just brilliant the way he goes about it.
It's fascinating that, when you're watching a Matt Hill game, the voice is incredible. And each person has their own voice. So like, when, Jared Waitley's on as well. And then, when Kingy comes on, or, when special comments comes on and Kingy comes on with his grovelly voice and he brings up a random stat that no one's even thought existed. And so each person sort of has their own personality, and they've sort of drilled that into me, that you do have to find what your thing is, because if you don't, you sort of just get forgotten. So yeah, I think Matty Hill has his voice and the way he calls it, and that's it's pretty interesting to see it sort of in play.
No, definitely. And we spoke a bit off air about you're going to Gather Round this week. What are you most looking forward to about Gather Round this week, and what are you hoping personally to get out of it? So you're doing a bit of work with Fox this week again. So what are you looking to get out of it this week?
Yeah, I think gather round. So far this year, pretty much all of the schedules for all of the Fox talent are pretty much set out.
Okay.
For a few weeks in advance, so all of the talent know what they're doing, which sort of makes it hard for them to sort of slot me in, sort of week by week. So I'm sort of like a gadget guy at the moment.
Yeah.
Gather round's a little bit different because there's so many games happening and they're sort of in all different areas, but all of the talent's in at the same time. But there's so many things that Fox wants to capture and put on the broadcast and showcase. Is that being the gadget guy, and a lot of the other talent and stuff have booked functions and little cashews and things like that, which is great for them. But it means that I'm very available throughout the weekend. So working flat stick, which means I'll be on broadcast a whole lot more than maybe what I've been so far, which is really exciting. It means that I'm working with a lot more players than I have so far, a lot more talent I'll be sort of side by side with instead of just shadowing. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to sort of that aspect of it and hopefully further showcasing, a bit of the maybe skill that I have, hopefully.
Can you talk to us about Gather Round, your thoughts on that? And because it's obviously an awesome spectacle for footy. Can you talk to us about that?
It's fascinating when you go there and you realise just, well, one, how many people travel to go there is really fascinating to see that people just love the environment that footy creates. It's awesome. Adelaide is the perfect place for it. It's just big enough to sort of house everyone, but it's just small enough that you always feel like you're surrounded by footy. So if you are a footy nuff, like Gather Round is the perfect place to be. There's just everywhere you look, from the airport to the ground to every cafe to every restaurant, has like a footy theme to it through the weekend, and everyone just wants to talk about the footy. Everyone is just fascinated by the game, and it's really cool to see all these different fans sort of mesh together, and everyone's wearing their scarves and their jumpers. Just like, Saturday morning you'll roll into a random cafe and everyone in there will have a scarf on or a hat or a jumper or a Guernsey or things like that. And it's like, it's so strange that just in a random cafe on a Saturday morning, there's a Gold Coast hat or a Gold Coast scarf in Adelaide. And I'm like, well, this is so strange, but it's so cool to see all of the fans come together.
It really is just a festival of footy.
Yeah, it's unreal, and there's so many activations, and there's a big footy fan festival site that just is bonkers every day, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
Definitely, and it's perfect for footy. It brings everyone together, and it's brilliant for the league. It's what they need. We'll change up the topic a bit here. Have you copped any hate over the last couple of years with your content creating and now Fox Footy? Do you cop any hate messages and stuff? And you'd cop a bit of heckling there from bands and stuff. So how do you deal with that?
We cop a lot of heckling on the field, which is, but that's all fun stuff.
Yeah.
That's always good. I'm probably the luckiest person out of everyone who I surround myself with that is a creator gets a lot more hate than I do. I'm not sure why. To be fair, I don't really create anything that is that controversial. The first real hate that I got was when the Fox thing got announced. That caused a lot of interesting DMs, let's say. And I can understand why people have opinions and things like that. And hate's an interesting one because you can understand where people come from with it. I think people go a little bit too far sometimes.
Over the top.
Yeah, but I can understand why people get frustrated with certain things or certain people or certain creators. I just try not to make anything that's too controversial. I try to celebrate the game as much as possible, and if I am being negative on the game, I either try and make it as factual as possible, or I try to make it as playful as possible. So you'll find that a lot of my videos on TikTok and stuff are very playful when I'm speaking negative about a team, because a lot of the fans of that team are happy to sort of, take the mickey out of their own team when they're not performing properly. And then if I'm being really serious, I'm not saying anything that I don't think is backed up by evidence. So recently I've been making a few more serious breakdown football videos.
Like the Melbourne Demons one, kicking it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's hard for people to hate on that because I'm saying something and then showing them exactly why I'm saying that. I think hate comes from maybe you saying something that either one you don't actually agree with and you're saying it just to get people riled up, which I think is a little bit disingenuous,
Yeah.
or you're saying something that's just flatly not true. And if you're not doing that, then I can understand why people sort of push back against you.
Wow, that's interesting. Have you got any advice for people that like content creators in this space that do deal with the hate? Because obviously you said you don't get a whole lot of it, but you did say that people around you do. Is there any advice you have to deal with that?
Yeah, so I think there's like maybe two types of hate. So there's one hate that is just, there is like a real tall poppy syndrome in Australia, and you know it's slowly changing with people making videos and taking sort of risks and you know doing things maybe in a different way, which I think is really cool. You know, we're becoming a lot more creative, which is great, but there is still that little bit of tall poppy syndrome, and that style of hate you can't really do anything about. You just got to sort of look back and sit down and say like I'm doing something I enjoy. I'm doing something that, you know, I'm taking a risk or something. And if that person's not happy with that, then it doesn't really matter. And then there's a second type of hate that maybe comes from a place of truth that sometimes you have to sit back and say, maybe what they're saying is understandable. Or so, you know, whenever I get a hate comment or something like that, my first thing is this legitimate? So, you know, if it's if one specific video or one specific post gets a lot of hate, then I'll just send it to my mates. Like we've got a group chat, send it to mates and say like, is it understandable why this is getting hate? And if, you know, a few of them come back and say like, I can understand where they're coming from, then sometimes you have to look back and say, you know, like if there's more than, you know, 20 people saying something, then maybe there's at least an element of truth to it. But if it's just one person just going off their rocker in the comment section, then you sort of just brush it off, I think.
Just think of, yeah.
Can you talk to us about the goals for the future? So what's next on the radar for Jarra Davis?
Yeah, I'm not sure, which is pretty terrifying, but somewhat exciting. You know, I really actually wanted to travel this year. So I like moved out of my house or the house I was renting, moved back in with the parents because I thought I was going to travel all year. Then I got this gig, and you know, I'll be working with cricket over the summer, so didn't really have that in plan. And then that essentially just rolled straight into footy season. But I want to finish my uni degree, and I really want to be a lawyer eventually. Not necessarily like in court or anything like that, but you know, management and sports management and player contracts and things like that really excite me. So I really want to do that eventually, but I sort of just say yes to as many experiences as possible. So if this Fox thing, you know, continues for the next few years, and you know there's more shows or there's more different experiences than what I'm doing at the moment, then I'll just keep saying yes, and hopefully I'll look back in maybe 5, 6, 7 years and have a whole lot of good stories to tell and good experiences and good life lessons and things like that.
Which is good. You're just taking it, see where it goes, really. You don't really know what to expect, what could happen, who's going to call you and ask what, which is good.
Great. Like it's a really good way to live, I think, is to just allow yourself to experience as many things as possible and try a bunch of different things. And
No, definitely.
you know, some things will work out, some things won't, but at least you'll have a story to tell at the end of it.
You've got the freedom there as well.
Mm.
Who would you say you've looked up to most in the past, whether it's a inspiration, media personnel? Who would you say has been one of your biggest influences and who you've looked up to the most?
It's a great question.
Put you on the spot a bit here.
Yeah. I think my old man, like the way that he like didn't finish high school, went straight into a trade, still does that trade. You know, has ran his own business for, you know, 20 something years or something like that now, and you know, still works there pretty much just by himself. You know, raised 3 boys who are all very, very different. You know, I work in this space. My brother's in the Navy. My other brother's a mechanic. Like, we're all extremely different people. And him just being able to not only like cultivate that sort of difference, but you know, allow us all to be successful in sort of whatever we want to do, and him sort of just, I guess, supporting us in whatever and giving us a crack at doing anything we want and taking me to footy and basketball and yelling at me from the sidelines on the footy field and at each quarter break telling me to not listen to the coach and listen to him instead. I don't know. I just think his presence has probably been the most influential, in the way that he sort of thinks about things has been the most influential, and he'll also be the first one to tell you that all of my footy opinions come from him, and he's the reason I have this gig, and everything I say on air is basically something that he said 2 weeks ago on the couch, and I'm just stealing his material. So
That's funny.
yeah, that's probably the biggest influence.
Absolutely. So you were talking to us just before about the work you could do for Fox Cricket in the future, and so could you outline what that might look like? Obviously, you might not know fully. It's footy season, obviously, but
Yeah, I think I think footy and cricket are pretty different. So footy, people love sort of the nuffy side of football, and there's different roles you can take with that. But I think cricket, there's less cricket nuffies. A lot of people just watch cricket just because it's really fun during summer. People like going to the cricket, having a few beers with their mates, and I think what I would want to do with cricket over summer would sort of just be cultivate that sort of experience more and more through the TV, through the broadcast. So have Fox actually maybe celebrate that culture a little bit, and sort of showcase the personality of people behind the scenes. So a lot of the commentators and a lot of the talent and things like that, they are the most normal people. And then the camera light flicks on and they change into their very professional self, which people see on TV. But people love seeing the behind the scenes, and I'd love to maybe showcase that more. It is a very footy change room environment, and I assume it's very similar with the cricket, and I think they want to showcase their personalities more. They probably just need a vessel, which I think I could be, to sort of bring it out more when the cameras are actually on.
that's awesome. That's a great idea. And that should be close to wrapping us up for today. So thanks for coming in, mate. Jarra Davis, for you guys at home. It's been a great chat, and thanks for being so real and raw.
No, absolutely. Appreciate it.